This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's radio.
Welcome back to the Sackheads Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So much to talk about tonight, and
we've already talked about a lot. I'm done. It's your turn.
So
tomorrow
is the anniversary of 9/11, 9/11/2001. First and foremost, before I get into this, and this is my rule that I have to live by, it's my niece's 21st birthday on 9/11. So before I say anything about 9/11 and the memory of those lost and the atrocities, I always have to wish her a happy birthday because I never want that day to be taken away from her. So happy birthday to my niece, Kim.
Happy birthday, Kim. Are we sending Kim an autographed card?
She's got one.
Outstanding.
Yeah, she's got one. I forged your name because, really, you can't read it anyways.
Yeah. No, you nailed it.
So tomorrow's the anniversary of 9/11. And, you know, we all know what happened on 9/11. It's always a time of year that's really hard, I think, for the country as a whole. One of the things that really bothers me is how more and more removed we are from the incident that happened on 9/11. I remember even up to the 10th anniversary, it was an all-day affair. The memories of what happened. I hate to bring the politics side into it, but somebody thinks the media intentionally leaves out the leadership on 9/11 and the weeks afterwards. Because you can argue about Bush and war and all this stuff. After 9/11 or the day of, the leadership that came out of our government, all the way around, Democrat and Republican, was amazing. Last year I played the clip of Congress singing God Bless America on the steps of the Capitol on that night, 9/11. Clips from President Bush, Vice President Cheney. Our leadership at that time was extraordinary for that event. We can talk about different things and cherry pick whatever, but that event was extraordinary. Our country responded as a whole amazingly. People were no longer worried about little things. They weren't worried about... I'll tell you, I was in Boston when it happened, and I was actually down in New York shortly after it happened, within a week or week and a half, I think. The attitude of people changed. And this is the part that makes me, I think, the most sad, is much after, and this was our generation's Pearl Harbor, if you will. The way our country responded, the people, the everyday people, and you saw at the Pentagon, you saw in New York, random everyday people running up to help. People would donate in water. People were donating goods. Doctors were just showing up. Firemen were just showing up. Police officers were just showing up. Emergency workers. You had guys like Steve Buscemi. And a lot of people don't know this. Actor Steve Buscemi was a New York City firefighter before he became an actor. After 9/11, he went back to his station house and was actually in, they call it the pit, at the Twin Towers, helping and doing the bucket brigade, hand by hand, the 5-gallon buckets moving out. He also worked the station house, doing anything he could to make their lives better because, in his own words, that was his brothers and he needed to go back. He did not allow people to take his picture in the station or his friends. He didn't want it to be about him. He didn't want it to turn into the Steve Buscemi show. He didn't want any part of that. Mm-hmm. To him, the most important thing to him was to be able to help. And I think that's really summed up the entire nation on that day. And the years afterwards, the first few years.
Flags were out front of every home.
Flags were out in front of every single home. People had a respect for each other that you hadn't seen in a long time. And really, it changed our nation, as horrible as it was, for the better. It changed how we treat each other for the better. I'm going to play a clip right now. It's very short, but this is how it all started. And then I'm going to talk about the day's events that followed.
Battalion 1 to Manhattan.
Battalion 1.
We just had a plane crash into Alpha 4 of the World Trade Center, transmit a second alarm, and start relocating companies into the area. Engine 6 to Manhattan,
Engine 6.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, there was just a huge explosion.
10-4.
Engine 1 on to Manhattan.
Engine 1-0.
Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
10-4.
10-4, we have units on the way up now. We reported fire on the 78th floor. That's unconfirmed time. We're going to need the PD for security around the entire World Trade Center. We have jumpers coming from the World Trade Center right now from the upper floors. Battalion 2, Manhattan.
Battalion 2, go.
Be advised to have jumpers, baby, jumpers. Come on.
All right, Division 1, be advised. Battalion 2 advised.
Marine 6 to Manhattan, urgent.
Hazmat 1, stand by. Marine 6, go.
You have a second plane into the other tower of the Trade Center. Major fire. Mayday. Engine, the little plane hit the second tower, okay?
All right, 10-4.
3 Adam to Manhattan.
3 Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on the FDR drive. Definitely something hit the second tower. Approximately 2/3 of the way up. You got visible fires showing out there. Suggest to the incident commander, Fort David, to transmit a 5th alarm to Tower 2.
Manhattan calling call Fort David.
The New York City Fire Department, the first video that was actually taken, the first responder that actually responded to the incident, actually witnessed it, was a New York City Fire Deputy Chief. He was out working that day. They were on a gas leak about 15 blocks from the Trade Center. He had a film crew with him, the French brothers. I don't know if you've ever seen the video. They document the whole thing, and it's absolutely stunning to watch. They stayed with that company the entire time. The moment he saw it, and this tells you what heroes do in this world, folks. And when we talk about firefighters, first responders, and law enforcement, this is what I think of. I don't think of the bad that we often focus on in this country. I think of the amazing heroes who flew to the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon knowing that something awful just happened and something awful could keep occurring. The guys on the ground didn't know that there were still other planes, potentially other planes in the air, and there was. There was Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And I'll talk about those heroes in a minute, too. They flew to those towers. They flew to the Pentagon. You had people at the Pentagon who were just everyday employees that were running into that burning building and trying to save people. You had firefighters, police officers, EMT medics, and everyday people that...
What you're hearing is Hardie Fiber Cement Siding living up to its reputation as the siding that helps resist weather damage, no matter what Mother Nature throws its way. James Hardie knows how important a reputation is, especially when you're a home builder. That's why Hardie products withstand the elements better than wood-based siding, with styles to match their strength. Because when home builders work with us, we deliver our best so they can look their best. Protect your reputation with exterior products by James Hardy.
It wasn't just them. There were just random people in New York City that took to the stairs of the World Trade Center to go up to try to get the people that couldn't get down. Most of us watched it on TV live. Most of us can remember everything, what they did that day. And I can remember all that. But what stands out to me is the heroes and those people who went. The first person killed that wasn't in a plane was a New York City fire chaplain. That was not in the plane, that was confirmed. There were deaths in the buildings and all that stuff. But he was the first public safety, if you will, that was killed. Somebody who responded. He didn't even have to be there. He could have stayed 10 blocks away. Those firefighters that set up in the tower, they knew what they were going up into. And they'll tell you, the ones that do interviews, and a lot of them don't do interviews, but the ones that do will tell you, they knew there was a chance that they weren't coming out, they weren't going to be able to stop the fire, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to save lives. They still chose, folks, and this is the American spirit at its best. They could have stayed outside. They could have waited. They could have not responded. They could have formed a plan or a different plan or tried to do it so they didn't have to go in. And that's not who they are. That's not who we are. And our basis of our spirit and our soul of our nation, we could not sit by and watch our fellow citizens perish without trying to save them. And there's amazing stories of heroics, and I can't recall all of them. That's why we have the internet. You can. Of heroics and horror. In that video from the two French brothers, and this tells you how desperate the people on the upper floors of the trade centers were, they were jumping to their deaths to avoid the heat, the smoke. And the fire department was arriving as they were jumping. More and more firefighters to go up, and the police department too. The special operations units from both the Port Authority PD as well as the New York City Police. As these bodies were falling and jumping from the top of the towers, they're going up. And you hear about the people that made it out, and you hear about acts within the building, just regular business people saving other business people. There's a great story of these two guys who, one guy was running down the stairs and he hears on the other side of a piece of drywalled wall, he hears somebody beating for help, and this first guy could have ran and just got out alive. And he decided, and it had to do with the fire door because of the stress on the building, the fire door was held shut and there was fire on the other side. And between the two of them, he stayed and they clawed through that wall, and they got each other, and they got the man that was caught behind out. And he was on the 65th or 68th floor. He was really close up high. And they came down. I think of the story of the guy that carried a handicapped woman down 55 flights of stairs on his back. Never asked for help, wouldn't take it. I think of the fire crew, and I think it was Truck 3 for New York, that had a group of people they were bringing down when the collapse at number 1 happened. And they rode the debris down and somehow made it out alive. Those are what I think of when I think of 9/11. That's the thing that's important to me. That's the memory that's important to me. Those amazing acts of heroism and how our country responded as a whole. Being in the Northeast, being not far removed, and like I said, I was down there a week and a half later, watching the spirit of New York City affected all of us in this entire nation. And that shows you what true tragedy is, and that shows you our true grit. You look at the Pentagon, how many people got hurt trying to go in to save people that were, they could have got out, they could have ran. And you can say, oh, they're in the military, it's their job. Yeah, they're in the military, but some of them are just analysts. They don't have life-saving training. They don't have that sort of enhanced training. And they turned around and went right back in to get other people out. Again, police officers, firefighters at the Pentagon, same story. There was no telling, and they knew the towers that were coming down. There was no telling if there was another plane in the sky, if the Pentagon was going to collapse. They didn't know what was on the other side, and they still chose to take that risk because of the Americans that were inside and the people that were inside. I look at Flight 93, and we'll never truly know 100% what happens on Flight 93. But based on a lot of this evidence that's been presented, from what I understand, the movie Flight 93 hit it pretty close. The phone calls, the tracking on the plane, the audio from within the plane that the Cleveland Tower recorded. You had a group of people that were told that they were just going to land and it was going to be like a hostage exchange for money, etc. And they started contacting people even though they weren't supposed to, and they quickly figured out that, hey, we're a missile. They're going to use us as a missile. The Pentagon's been hit. Both World Trade Centers are hit. We don't know if there's other planes around. And they decided to take action. Now, the first guy standing in front of them was believed to have a fake bomb. And they knew that if they took that first step, the whole plane could have exploded. They knew there was a suicide mission in place because the other 3 planes they assumed were hijacked and flown into things. And they still said, we have to stop this. We can't allow this to happen. We can't be used as a missile against other Americans. And you talk to people that had family members that talked to them on that plane, and I remember those GTE seat phones that you saw for years when you fly, and I always think of those for some weird reason. They banded together. They got a plan together. They knew the odds were greatly against them. They knew they were probably going to die. The people that were on board were just, you couldn't ask for a better group of people. You had somebody who was a karate expert. You had somebody who was a weightlifter. You had somebody who was former military. All these people that they pooled their resources. They got together a plan. They did with what they had, and they made sure that nobody else would be victimized on that day and sacrificed themselves to do that. And they rushed that cabin and took that chance. And Agador just said in the chat room, the last things that were heard from that plane over one of those phones were the words, "Let's roll," when they put it into action. That, to me, sums up who we are as a nation. That, to me, sums up who we need to remember we are as a nation. You know, the last 6 years, and to a point we're involved in it as well, we get into this bipartisan bickering. And we worry more about little things, and this guy said this guy said that here on the show as well. And we forget who we are. And I know the 4th of July is supposed to be the day to remember our independence and our liberty, and there are other days through the year to remember and take honor of those who've passed, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. But for me, 9/11 is one of those days. To me, 9/11 will always be the day in my life that our nation turned around for the best. Even if it was for a short time, even if it was for short-lived, we still had a spirit well up inside us that we saw through things that we have forgotten about, but we saw through things. There was no race issues that you heard about. There was no looting. That was the most amazing thing to me. All the destruction in downtown New York, all the destruction, everyone thinks it's just the Trade Center. If you'd ever been there, there's all the buildings around it, stores, businesses, apartments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was no looting. People didn't show up and like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this situation. It was beyond that. You saw people of different age groups, people of different social economic groups, banding together for the cause of this nation and to help heal this nation and repair this nation and really lift this nation back up to where it should always be. We should always be at that pinnacle. We should always be at that point. We should always respect ourselves and each other as Americans and then deal with the other stuff afterwards. And I think that's something that we lose. And we lose more and more as 9/11 goes further and further away. We can argue about how it's not being taught in schools the right way anymore. We can argue how the true history has gone away from what's being educated to our children and what some of the conspiracy theory nuts and all the other stuff that's been out there. But for those of us who are grounded and for those of us who pay attention and for those of us who know, you need to keep telling that story. You need to keep telling our history the way it happened. You need to remind people how important that day is to us as a nation, the day that we were attacked and we wouldn't deal with it. And to me, that's what 9/11 means. that those lives will not be sacrificed for nothing.
But we forgot so quick.
Yes.
As a nation.
Yes.
We did. And I think that there's a good argument that can be made that that is by design. Because there is a group, and it's not conspiracy theorists, but there is a group that does not like America as it is, does not believe America is exceptional.
When I say conspiracy theories, I just want to clarify that it's the people that think it was an inside job, et cetera. Okay.
And we don't teach those things in school. We don't teach who specifically attacked us. There's being taught that we were attacked or that there was a tragedy. But it's not. I mean, look, do you remember when the movie Pearl Harbor came out?
Yes.
With Ben Affleck? And there was some scene with a Japanese doctor or dentist looking out over the harbor, and there was a Japanese group that lost its mind because it painted the Japanese people in a bad light.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. The Japanese attacked us, and there was intel coming from the islands. So I think that's legitimate, but I also think that that's almost by design. I honestly think that there is a group in this country that does not want us to remember who we are, or that we are in fact exceptional, or that we are special nation where we really are the last bastion of true liberty, and that is slowly declining. And it's sad to me. I remember walking down the street after 9/11 and hearing people thank cops.
Yes.
When they pass them.
Oh yeah,
and
cops, firefighters. I
hadn't heard that in forever. Everybody loves firefighters. For the most part still, right? But I'm talking like you didn't hear anything about there's the cops or anything like that. People, I saw people thanking them when they'd see them, and it happened very very often. But within a few months, that started to go away a little bit. We also had, I think, people got closer to their religious beliefs for a little bit. It did affect this nation. There was some pride.
Oh yeah,
there was some pride, and I don't mean pride in a good way. There was some of that, but there was also pride in a bad way, right? We are going to rebuild. We are going to do this and that, and that's good to band together. But I think there's other things that could have been incorporated like that either, instead of hey, we'll rebuild and show them, as opposed to hey, we're going to come together, realize what's truly important, and rebuild together. We're going to rededicate our country to what it was meant to be dedicated for, and so forth. So I do think there was a little bit of missed opportunity there after 9/11. When I think of 9/11, I think about because I was it absolutely affected me like it did most other Americans, and I remember watching it on television, watching the towers fall. I actually had a very, very long day that day with a lot of things that happened. And I remember anger at being attacked, as well as feeling such a closeness with my fellow Americans and whatnot. And for me, the sacrifice that those men and women made, the fire department and the police department, as well as the stories of heroism you talked about, really kind of reinforced the heroism of our public servants, as well as appreciation for our folks in the military that responded to that threat. But for me, I never wanted to be in a position as a country where our guard is down.
Yes.
I never wanted to be in a position again to where thousands of our citizens are put at risk.
Yes.
Because of our inaction, because we were asleep, because we didn't pay attention, because we were uneducated or unaware of what was going on in the world. By our own choices, right? We were very caught up in our own bubble, in our own lives. And what is sad for me as 9/11 is here is I think we are back in that same state.
I agree with you.
I think that we are very vulnerable as a nation. And I'm not trying to bring politics into this, but this plays into exactly where we were at 9/11. I think we have a border. We have a threat in ISIS where they want to destroy us. They are at war with us, whether we wanted to formally declare war on them or not. They have identified spots in our border. that they want to come across. They are here. They have people that were trained overseas that are here that I believe are ready to perform some sort of attack or whatnot. And we have issues that are not being addressed that can be absolutely be exploited by this same type of terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the frustrating part for me. And when I think of 9/11, I mean, I haven't heard anything on the news of any kind of
memorials
being
like
held,
that.
Locally where we are. I haven't heard of anything about any additional patrols.
Security.
I haven't heard anything about, hey, 9/11, we're elevating the terror level.
Yeah, like England did.
There has been nothing. And with these issues that we are not addressing as a nation, and we're talking about 9/11, so I'm not going to point the fingers at this administration, but it's all of us.
Yeah.
We as a nation are not dealing with this.
We are not.
And all of these things leave us vulnerable to the same type of attacks, and I would argue even worse because of the type of attack that I think could be coming. And it saddens me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's only so much we can do. Am I proud to be an American? Of course I am. Will I serve my country and the people best I can, particularly in tragedy? Of course I will. But I'm saddened that we are back in this position, I fear. And even with everything that's happened, the Boston Marathon bombers, those officers, when they were trying to capture them, were up against gunfire. They were up against explosive devices, grenades. And now, a couple years later, we're having an argument about, well, cops don't need armored vehicles. Well, the border you're racist if you want to protect yourself. And it's sad to me, Sean.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Wow, this is a great topic to end the show on.
I know.
Such a downer.
It's gonna be a little somber. What am I gonna say? And I think Ags in the chat room and Kel's in the chat room, a couple people in the chat room talking about what the history needs to be taught and how we need to do it right. And I think it comes to ourselves to teach our children, our loved ones, our friends, our children's friends, etc., our friends' children, what really happened that day and what really occurred, and how we cannot allow a complicit media or just laziness go away. I also do want to note that day on media. And I know we're in the industry as well, and we are, as much as people don't want to admit it. We're here.
Why'd you look at me?
I don't know. I remember, and Jason reminded me of this not too long ago, but guys like Peter Jennings being on the air for 17 hours. Media, there was no partisanship. It wasn't about anything. They actually did their job that day, and they were reporting what was going on. And I think that's something that needs to be remembered, too, is because it's proof that they can do that. They can actually report the facts versus having their damn spin on every single thing. But the media, as much as I get annoyed with them, the media gave us the information of what happened, and we'll forever have that in our brain, right, wrong, or indifferent. So we're coming up to the end.
Well, then why doesn't the media get it together and do some kind of 9/11 special or remind us?
Just like it should. I think every year on 9/11, they should play every. If I was a news media owner, and I might be. Well, you know what I mean. I would have shows like they have a Miller Report tomorrow that's going to have a chronological event of the entire day, 5 p.m. Pacific here on the SHR Media Network. He's also going to have Dan Butcher from Pundit Press. Dan was in New York as a reporter on 9/11. So that's going to be a show that you want to get because that's a reporter's perspective from somebody that's on the ground. And I'm going to have some other things up on the feed through the course of the day tomorrow for you to listen to and just really sink in how important 9/11 was and how important it needs to be. We're going to close out. As I'm going to close, I'm going to play President Bush's speech from the night of 9/11 addressing the nation. We will see you next Wednesday here on the Sackheads Radio Show at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 on the East. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us. I know it's kind of like hard to end on an up, but we're just going to leave it at that. We'll see you next week. Nothing?
Nothing.
I love it when we end like that.
What else could I say?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
The best late-night conservative talk show in America, Sackheads Radio. And listen, there are no people better on the air to give you the best in conservative talk than Sackhead Sean and Sackhead Clint. And we're working on the immigration papers for a certain other guy who happens to work here too. For those who are tuning in, around the world to the best in late-night conservative talk, Tackheads Radio.
Tack News. Tack News.
Radio.
Tack News. Tack News.
Radio.
The best late-night conservative talk show in America. In America.
In America.
And in this web was a large, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest spider I've ever seen.